Hello, I'm Joan. I'm a Canadian family physician who also works as a restorative medical educator, facilitator, and coach. I create spaces that rehumanize the work of healthcare. I'm creating this podcast to remind myself, as well as anyone else working in a helping profession, that when you are working and caring for your human patients, you are the other human in the room. Hello there, healthcare humans. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of The Other Human in the Room. I'm super excited to have my first two-guest podcast. I don't know if you guys know, but this is like a milestone. So congratulations on like setting a record, the largest number of people in a podcast.
Wow.
I'm here with two fellow physicians, and we're meeting for the first time, but I've heard some really cool things that you guys are doing, and we have some mutual connections that we're singing your praises. And I think our mutual connection, Catherine, called at least Jaclyn the Joan Chan of Oshawa or something. So I'm like, well, I got to meet my clone. Thank you. So I'd love if you could each introduce yourself one at a time. Maybe we'll start with you, Jaclyn.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm Jackie. I wouldn't go that far, but I am Jackie. I live in Curtis. I'm a family doctor. I spent most of my time in an office in family medicine, and I do some labor and delivery as well, and newborn hospice. I've got two awesome kids. I live in Oshawa. I love to garden. I love to do art. Hang out with my friends. And I think the reason that you've invited us here is because of a club that we've started. So we'll talk a bit more about that once we've introduced Natasha.
Sounds good.
Hi, so I'm Natasha Aziz. I'm also a family doctor. I practice in Newcastle, Ontario, and I live in a small town called Bowmanville with my husband, my daughter, and my dog. I also love to garden. I like to spend time outside. I love like crafts and sewing and that kind of thing. In my practice, I work 2 days a week in my family medicine office where I see, all the babies and the seniors and everybody in between. Do a little bit of urgent care here and there. Have the pleasure of working with Jackie and some other awesome family doctors in the family medicine obstetrical group locally. And then I also have an academic position, which is 2 days a week. And I work in the first family medicine focused MD program, which is the Queens Lakeridge MD program. But of course, the views I'll express in this podcast are my own. And so I get the pleasure of teaching medical students and residents, and like Jackie does that as well. So we're all often thinking about our younger colleagues, our new grads, and how we can best look after them.
I love that. Okay, so you guys have to tell me about this club. It's got a great name. And what was the origin and what's it all about?
Yeah, so our club is called Joy in Medicine. So how we started, I was thinking about like how to introduce what we do, but like I think it actually probably good to introduce sort of our friendship. I think that's probably how it started. So Natasha and I, our husbands are actually best friends. And so when we kind of decided to work in the same community, we were sort of forced together because our husbands are kind of, glued at the hip. So we turned out to have a lot in common and we became really good friends. And definitely over, COVID together and, the last few years, we've both had our struggles and trying to figure out being moms and being doctors and how to deal with some of the, negative things that we're seeing talked about in family medicine, the toxicity that we see online. This is just like something that we would talk about all the time. And so during one of our conversations together, we sort of we're talking about how can we change this as a community? Like, is there anything that we could do to make a small difference, right? And one of the things that I sort of became totally obsessed with in the last couple of years is I started being a brownie leader with my daughter. So my daughter's 8. Well, she's now 9. She was 8 at the time. And I sort of was learning about brownies and embers, and I just loved how we just had what Embers is like a weekly meeting where you're learning how to be good people, where you're just learning how to be a good member of your society. You're hanging out, making connections, and you're just doing fun things together. And so when we were having this little, Natasha and I were talking, we're like, well, why couldn't we do that, but for doctors? And so we decided that day to just do it. And I think we had our first meeting within like a couple weeks of us having that conversation. Natasha, do you want to talk a little bit about what our first meeting was like?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I'll just kind of go on what Jackie was saying about how we started. Like, a lot of it was just a lot of the negative. Like, people weren't seeing each other, especially through the pandemic and that kind of thing. And a lot of the interaction with colleagues was in, like, for us anyway, and probably for lots of others, was on online groups. And it was just so negative. And we're both realizing, like, how hard it is to, I get it. It's really important that we're able to vent. And, like, for sure, that's at least 50% of what we do when we get together. But if that's actually all you do, it's not good. Like, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't help you, improve. It doesn't kind of address some of the challenges. I mean, I'm acknowledging there's lots of different ways to address, like, all the challenges in our profession. So we'll just talk today about what we're doing. Yeah, but the first meeting we did was actually on a little conversation about gratitude. That was the goal anyway, and so that's something that I think both of us have made an effort to practice, and it's definitely helped me, like, in my office practice for sure, to just, like, at the end of the day, like, make note of all the things I did that made a difference, rather than focusing all the, like, oh, if I had done this, if I had done that, oh, if I, did I do okay in this part? Like, rather than focusing only on all that, to really intentionally, like, look for that. And so that's in my practice, but also in life in general. So we got together, I think there were maybe like 6 of us at the first meeting, something like that. Yeah. And we talked a little bit about, what a gratitude practice can be. Like, it doesn't have to be intensive. It can just be when you go to sleep at night, like, what's one good thing? Like, it doesn't have to be a whole big thing. And that's also a theme of the group, right? Like, we're like, it's not a whole big thing. And I've kind of, like Jackie here and there, hey, you want to do it formally? Like, you want to make it like a formal, like, thing, like with a hospital or with a program? And she's like, no, this is good for now. And, like, I have to agree. Like, I think that's part of the point of the group, is, like, not everything has to be so big and heavy and difficult. Like, it's okay to just, do what feels good, that helps everybody, improve. Yeah. So yeah, just a little bit more about that first meeting on gratitude. Like, we talked about that, but we also just, there are a couple of new grads at the meetings who were really new in practice. So we probably spent, like, a good chunk of the time, like, kind of talking about how things were going with them, like, with their meet and greets, with building their practices, like, what kind of challenges there are. And I think it's also a really nice way through this group that we can foster that, like, mentorship, like, across the career span. Like, we're both in practice, I guess, like 7-9 years, like that kind of range. So hopefully we have a little bit of wisdom to share, but we also have people who come to our meetings who've been practiced like 25 years or more. So that's really nice. I think that, they've really seen a lot of the things, and they also are senior colleagues, like, well, I shouldn't call them senior colleagues, they may not like that, but our colleagues who have, quite a bit more experience than we do. Like, they've been through lots.
Yes. Yeah. Some of our members are retired now, which is really cool. I thought that was awesome. And so one of my, like, that first meeting was at my house, and it was in the living room. It was night. We just had tea, and, like, I just love clubs. Like, don't you remember, like, going to university, and there would be, like, a club fair, and you would join, like, 20 clubs, and every night you'd be going to someone's, living room on their weird couch and having snacks and just chatting about stuff. And to me, I'm like, when does that stop? Like, why does it stop? Because it did stop for me anyways, as soon as I left med school. I remember being part of a lot of med school clubs. But then residency, I don't think there are as many clubs. I don't think there's any, really. There should be. We should make more. But then into adulthood, the only clubs are really, like, I mean, going to the gym, which is awesome. If you go to a church, that's awesome. But, like, there aren't a ton of other, especially, like, free things that you don't have to be a huge expert in anything to be part of that club. So to me, that's that first meeting was so awesome, to just be sitting around a living room with people and chatting. I'm like, oh, it just feels so warm and cozy.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm already, like, super obsessed with this idea. So I just think it's so beautiful that, especially that it's not a whole big thing. Like, so
it doesn't have to be
about stuff as well.
Yeah. And so I got a little nervous, right? Because we we created a Facebook group, as one does with these sort of things. And then we advertised it on one of our local WhatsApp chats for all the family doctors in Durham region. And then all of a sudden we had like 75 members. And then I'm like, okay, now it's becoming a bit of a thing.
Uh-oh.
But luckily, like, I've always made it that, like, the attendance to the meetings isn't mandatory. It's not something that, like, you have to do. You can just go to whatever meeting sounds interesting. And we still, we usually have between, 2 and 10 people at each meeting. We're not expecting 70. Oh my God, can you imagine? We're not expecting 75 people to come. But it's so cool to have those people reading our posts that we put. Like we try to talk a few times a week on topics that interest us. And it's cool seeing them being read and commented on. So I think there's some people that are just sort of looking into this and starting that online presence, which is really cool.
So how often do you actually meet in person then?
Once a month.
Once a month.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's that been like? Like, is it mostly in living rooms? And what kind of topics have you explored?
Yeah, we've done a range of different things. So what we do, just to kind of have some idea of what we're going to do, we alternate between like a kind of topic-based session, which we would usually do at one of our places, and then a session that's really just about getting together, like just kind of community, we call it like community building based, I guess. So like our first session was the gratitude one. And then I think the next thing we did like a trail walk where people brought their kids, and there's a trail where you can like feed the birds near where we live. So we did that. I had done a talk, like a proper like formal faculty development talk on how you could apply QI principles to wellness, like making wellness the goal of your strategies that you're doing in your office. I did a little chat on that. So then we kind of just brought that into the living room and had a little talk, a mini version of that talk, and then a discussion. And we went, just Jackie and I went to a choir performance. It was our smallest meeting,
yes.
But it was wonderful. And it was really neat actually, because it was on the theme of mental health, and it was really good and really moving. Yeah, and we did one of the MAC modules on physician well-being. That was one of our little living room sessions. And then we have some more things upcoming, but that just kind of gives you an idea. We have like, something that's kind of like social, whatever we kind of think makes us feel good. We said like maybe one day we'll get a family Zumba activity day because we both love Zumba, but like obviously not each thing is something that would appeal to everyone, but that's also, as I said, not our goal. Like, hopefully over time, like everybody who went to the trouble joining the Facebook group, they'll find like one or two events or topics that really like ring true to them. And hopefully if a few people come to that, then that's, you find your people. So I think, that's kind of the strategy we take. And I think it's kind of nice just to have the, like, it's not a lot of pressure because it's basically like 6 topics a year, like 6 activities a year. It seems very manageable. So we're pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And we try to make, this might be selfish of us, but we try to make each thing something that we really want to do. And so that way, if it does turn out to be just the 2 of us, still a good night. It doesn't matter, right? There's no pressure if people come or not. And I think I just think that's awesome. Not making, like you say, not making it a whole thing, just doing something that's fun and that's bringing a lot of I feel like I'm learning so much. I feel like it's really brought a lot of joy to my practice, and if that's enough. Like it doesn't have to be a whole thing where everybody gets improved by it.
Yeah, I'd actually love to hear that. Like, first, what do you notice sort of before and after starting this? Like, what were some of the things that felt tough enough that you had the impetus to start a whole club about finding joy in medicine? And what kind of joy have you found in medicine since starting the club?
Such a good question. I mean, I think both of us, even before starting the club, we had made some like significant changes. So Joan, I know I mentioned even before we started recording, I was in the Charting Champions group. So like that was a way, like after my daughter was born, I made a lot of changes to finishing on time and that kind of thing. So that was important, but I mean, it wasn't really like enough. Like, I think also, as I mentioned, like in the pandemic, like the isolation and everything and not seeing your colleagues, I think there was a lot of that to recover from. So I think in terms of like while I'm actually in my office, maybe not that much has changed, but I think all the things we're doing to kind of build that connection and like prioritize well-being. And I think that actually just improves like your general like reservoir as a person. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just easier to cope with things. Like it's good to know, especially because I think, you know, when you hear a lot of negative, you're like, am I the only one who like wants to try to make things better in this way? Like, I know lots of people are doing different things to try to make different things in our profession better. But you kind of look around and you're like, you know, can we do this? Like, is anybody else interested? So it's actually really nice. Like, you know, when you share, we're doing a Joy in Medicine club, like we didn't have any people being like, you know, take off the rose colored glasses. Like lots of people were like, you know what, I could use a little bit of that. And I think that was really nice. And I think that more than anything, like it just gives you a lot of fuel to keep going. Like if you're, you know, because I talked earlier like about really wanting to improve like the practice environment for medical students and new grads and like that kind of thing. So it's just really nice to know that you're not the only one who really feels that's an important thing to be doing.
I love that. Mm-hmm. How about you, Jackie?
Yeah, I mean, I agree too that like some of the changes we made were before this club. For example, especially during COVID, definitely working way too much, particularly in the office. I was in the office 4, sometimes 5 days a week. And just things weren't feeling good with the way that my schedule was running. I was booking like 6 weeks out, like just things weren't feeling good. And so I kind of, like most people at some point, I hit a breaking point. I said, you know, I have to change the way this is because I can't go into work every day just dreading it. I have to make a big change here to make this more the way that like that's more consistent with how I wanted medicine to look, right? And so one of the things I did was I cut down to 3 days a week and excuse me, I started office sharing because we have different practices with another doctor. And that brought a whole bunch of connection and really a lot of fun to our office. I changed the way I was scheduling things to more open access or like same day walk-in style. So I don't have a 6-week wait anymore. I now have a no week wait, which has brought like so much satisfaction because I feel like I'm exactly meeting my patients' needs now and my own needs, obviously. And so just some of these changes, I kind of gave me the idea that like we actually can control so much where that's a privilege that we have actually is like as family doctors, we're able to change a lot of the things in our lives. And so it's a lot of work to change things. It took probably 3 years of us making a lot of changes before I started feeling good again. But that's what this group is about though, is like, what are the things that we actually can control? And it's not about, and like another thing too, I feel like sometimes you hear joy medicine, you think that it's going to be us just sitting around having, you know, talking about how wonderful everything is, but that's actually not what we do at all. Like, I think that as part of finding joy in your life is supporting each other and acknowledging that things aren't always good, right? That there's just no rhyme or reason to some of the things that we go through and struggle through. But that's okay, right? We can find joy in the things that do bring us joy, but you know, we can also just sit in the feelings that we have now. If you're like right now, I actually thought it was kind of funny because I'm actually having a very bad week. Like I've had 2 days late, I've had a cold. I've, I had one of those days where just everything is going wrong. Yesterday, I like went outside to go do something right. I was going to go buy some plants and then I dropped my cell phone and it shattered into a million pieces. And I was like, oh my goodness, nothing can go right today. And I had a very sad call shift with a very bad outcome just a couple of days ago. So it's just been a week of just me crying a lot. And I've been thinking like, well, does this mean, what does it mean to find joy when things are actually not great this week? And maybe, and then I was, as I've been reflecting, I'm like, maybe that's not even the right question. Maybe I don't have to find joy in this week. Like this week sucks. And that's okay too. I know I'm going to find joy again. Like, but this week is just not a good one.
Yes.
And that's okay. So I think that that's the kind of stuff we talk about, right? Like, it's not all about just being like, oh, medicine's wonderful, everything's great. Like, it's not. That's the reality.
It's not.
Yeah.
I think it, just objectively speaking.
Yeah.
The thing I often say is like, we're not nailing it yet. Or like, we haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
To say it in a way that's somewhat optimistic or, at least honest.
Yeah.
I think, I love the idea of like having a hard week and how this kind of, even just this kind of mindset, much less this community to rely on each other's, like how it's still relevant then. Because there's the version of toxic positivity or silver lining things.
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, only happiness. But like, even your title, I think is great because it's like joy in medicine. And sometimes you gotta look real close and you gotta like
It's hard to find
sift
sometimes.
through some stuff.
Yes.
You're like,
And you have to change
Yeah.
things, right? Like that's why we chose
Yes.
joy in medicine, right? Like it's not about, like, we talk about this all the time about work-life balance. Like that's not, like, obviously work-life balance is great, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't to have your outside of work life so good that it makes up for your horrible work life. Like that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to be like, okay, how can we actually like improve life outside of our work, but also improve life inside our work, because there's a lot to be done there, and it can be done.
Absolutely. Natasha, do you have anything to share about that point as well?
I just agree with everything Jaclyn said. We're like pretty much mind melded at this point. I think I've really learned like through like my own challenges, like, you know, in the last few years, like during the pandemic and everything, that it really does help to kind of on purpose pick out those positive things, even when it looks like you have a bit of a mess on your plate. Makes a really big difference. Because like the more you figure out what's working, even if it's something really tiny, it then gives you just that idea, like, you know, some things are working, maybe more things can work, you know, and if you start with smaller things, you know, it's pretty easy to sit down at the end of the day or like on your drive home, say like, what's one good thing I did for a patient today that I'm really proud of? Like it's easy to do that. And then if you can do something like that, then maybe you can start, you know, scheduling your first patient later so you can do a bit of paperwork. You know what I mean? Like you can make these other changes. You can start giving yourself like an hour and a half lunch break instead of an hour, which is something my like secretaries did for me when I started my practice, when they were like, you're not eating. So there's like little things that you think you can't do. Like some big, you know, big bad bosses could be like, you can't take, you know, 90 minutes instead of 60 minutes, even if you add it on the other end of the day or the beginning of your morning, or I mean, honestly, whatever you want to do. And I think that's kind of what Jaclyn's getting at. Like we have so much agency for the most part as family doctors, you know, when you start, when you finish, how long your appointments are, how long you take for lunch, do you schedule like empty spots for breaks or charting or to go to the bathroom? Like you, for the most part, you know, most of us actually do have control over those things. We just haven't really like taken the control. So I think that's like a really important message. Like when we, you know, complained about the negative Facebook group echo chamber, like a lot of that was just like no agency. Like this is happening to me. It's so bad. Like, how will I ever fix it? And that's part of the reason why when we did the faculty development thing, we talked about, you know, using QI strategies to improve your day. Because like lots of those things can actually be fixed. We're just so used to all the things we can't fix. You know, if you only have 4 people in your call group, like tough luck, you're going to do 1 in 4 call. And if someone goes away, you're going to do, you know, 1 in 3. And if 2 people go away, you're going to do 1 in 2. Like that is not that easy to fix. That's more complicated to fix. But if your problem is like, you know, I know I have, you know, a 6-week wait and I'd like to have not a 6-week wait, like, Jackie could talk again about how she did like same day access for part of her schedule and it like resolved some of those issues. And it's not like easy to make that change. But I think it's important to realize that like change is possible and, you know, we're not expecting anybody to make any changes. Like it's, you know, it's their business, but we just want to have a group where you could talk about that. Like you could talk about like, this is what I did, like, or like, this is what I'm really struggling with. Do you have any ideas? Like sometimes we'll post about that. Like one of the things in our group was a post about boundaries, like who's doing well setting boundaries with patients and who's struggling and like, you know, sharing some tips and that kind of thing. So I think, you know, nothing's too big or too small to discuss in our group, which is kind of a nice thing. Like it's just open for any of that.
I love that. I think, well, one thing that's been eye-opening to me is since doing this kind of work, both like talking with and then sometimes working with folks who work in different professions, so not just physicians, and also for people who work in different countries, or specifically the States. And everyone that I've spoken to does have agency, and there is always something within their control that they could change. And I will say, like, sometimes I hear the circumstances of someone who is like hired and part of their contract is to see someone every 5 minutes or something, where it's like, okay, that would be probably a bit trickier to shift, or, you know, would have to involve a lot of risk benefit analysis for yourself of what happens if you break that, because you just, I mean, nobody can see everyone 5 minutes. It's sort of an absurd contract to have, right? But like, no, we don't, nobody's checking us, like, at least us in Ontario. Like, yes, there are people who audit our charts. There's, you know, if we break the law, there's someone will catch us, etc. But like, we are our own bosses. And there's, I think that sometimes maybe even how we're socialized, and I think our training can continue to improve to add more business aspects and HR aspects, though I know there's time constraints for especially family medicine for that. Like, I think that's often a bit of then why people feel like they don't have control, is like not even just recognizing that literally they're the ones in charge, and feeling scared of recognizing that they're the ones in charge. And it's just to say, it's so much, I'm seeing it in your faces, and I've experienced that it's quite liberating to realize, like, oh, I am in charge, and I can mess this up and experiment and see what works. And I just love hearing both of your examples of doing that for yourself.
Yeah. And even if you can't change your circumstances, like, there's still so much, like, I think about like thought work, or like you can change the way you think about your circumstances. It's kind of corny to say, but there's so much power in changing the way that you think about things, right? Like, maybe you know, you could go into a room with a patient that you know that you've seen once a month for 8 years, and you've never been able to get to the bottom of their issues. And so you could think like, oh, look, this person again, this is going to be a chore to see them. Or you could think, I bet I have something to offer this person today. Like, you can make the choice to think differently about the situation. But I think that takes work. That's not easy. That's something that actually probably is best done with a, you know, I don't know, a coach or a therapist or a friend to bounce this with. It's hard to do by yourself.
Yeah, that's another thing about the club. I'm curious along that line, like, the other people in your group, have they started to report back to you any benefits or what they're noticing is coming up, having had this space to support each other with sort of shifting and looking for joy in medicine?
I think we're still waiting on some of that. I know there has been some, like, especially from the newer grads, like, we've talked about a few things that I know, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know some of the things we talked about, like, they've started doing, like, with their meet and greet appointments, and, like, you know, just in terms of like how they manage some things, and yeah, some of the stuff just about like very specific little communication strategies. So I do think it's helping. I think it might be too early to tell, like, on what the eventual impact of this will be, because really we've only had like 6 meetings, so really like 3 topic related, and different people coming to each one. So I think it might just be too early to tell, but yeah, definitely very hopeful over time that you know, we joke sometimes that we're just trying to like nudge the whole culture in our community, like, in a general direction, like, just do the best we can. So I think it might take a long time for everything to kind of like trickle through and have like a benefit, because I really hope that it'll not just be, as I said, not just the people who come to our meetings, not just people who are on our Facebook group, but eventually kind of, you know, in the larger community as well, because we are all connected in that way. But yeah, I think it's too early to see that yet.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know, the way I feel about the group is that it maybe doesn't matter that much. I don't know. Like, I just feel like we're creating a space here, and this is our vibe. This is how we jam. This is what we like. And if people want to come on board, that's awesome. If they don't, I don't care. Like, it's just, this is what we like, and not everyone has to like it. Right. And not everyone has to think the way we think. So, and that's what this last 6 months has been about, is finding the people that are interested and on the same page. And there's lots of those, you know, I think there's 79 people in our group now. There's lots that have never said a single thing. And that's totally cool. Like, I think that maybe they're reading the posts. I don't know. I think there's a way to see who's read posts, and maybe it's making them think about a thing or two and they got something from it. And if they didn't, then that's fine. They can file that away with the other 1,000 things we see a day on Facebook that don't make a big difference in our lives. But I think it's made a difference in my life. Like, I feel like it's really, it's just fun. Like I really I look forward to our meetings. Our next few meetings I'll go over because we planned ahead this time. So our next meeting is next weekend, I believe. We're doing a community cleanup. So this one will be one with, we call it Gym and Friends. So JIM, Joy in Medicine. So Gym and Friends means you can bring your friends, you can bring your family, you can bring your kids, right? And so it's like we're going to clean up the creek. So we've got garbage bags, and we're just going to go for a walk and do a little community cleanup. And then the following month, we're doing narrative medicine campfire. So I've actually had a few residents tell me they're very excited for this. So what this can be is a campfire where everybody brings a short passage, like under, 1 or 2 paragraphs that somewhat relates to medicine. So it can be fiction, nonfiction, an article. And then we're just going to share it and discuss everybody's passage that they brought. And we're also going to have s'mores because it's around a campfire. I'm like, how fun is that? It's going to be so good. And then the following meeting is going to be craft and chat, right? We're just going to do open crafts. People can bring whatever they're working on or try. We have a ton of craft supplies, so we'll try their own thing. And then we're going to just talk. That will be more of an open meeting for people to talk about what they're struggling with or what they are trying to brainstorm, and then do some crafts together. So I don't know. I just think that this is fun.
Oh, yes. And speaking as someone who is like currently right now practicing a project that was just, I had no idea if anyone would listen to it or if it would have any impact or whatever, this podcast being the thing, I think that's the only way to do anything. And that includes like even like what to decide to do in QI for your practice or whatever. It's like my current whole hypothesis for this year is like, is it gonna be fun for me? Am I gonna have a good time? Then that's perfect. And I also think, honestly, like even when you look at what creative endeavors like catch people's interest, like heard of Miss Taylor Allison Swift? I understand. Also a fan. Yeah. She's very talented, etc. And also she clearly really loves music. And like I think she would be doing this even if she had her OnlyFans were her family. Like I think she would still be like doing her little songwriting thing, right? So just to give you some encouragement, like I think the way that you're going about this is the way that you won't even ever know the full impact, and it won't be because the success of it won't be measured by the number of people in the group or whatever. It will be in ways you'll never measure, and it will be very fun when a learner emails you 5 years from now and says that one time when we were crafting and you said that one sentence changed my life, and you'll be like, oh dang, like, you won't even know. Like that's what I see coming your way, just so you know.
That's lovely.
Yeah, I hope so. That's awesome. I mean, it's about community, right?
It's same with like patients and everyone. Like I think when you start really embodying what you wanted to see in the world, that's exactly what you did. You like kind of looked around and you're like, dang, I wish I saw more of this. And then you were like, guess that's up to me then. And then you did it. Like I think that's always the invitation, and it's not easy, and sometimes it feels like, well, how come no one else is? And wouldn't it be nice? But here we are, and it feels good to do the thing that you want to do. They are doing whatever thing they think they're supposed to do, and then I don't know, it all makes this little stew of humanity.
Yes.
But like you have your flavors that are like what you were meant to add to the pot, I actually didn't mix that metaphor. I'm proud of myself. I usually do. So good. I would love, as we're wrapping up here, looking at the time, what is something new that you are trying out that's bringing you joy, or that you're thinking might bring you joy? And it can be something you're trying out that's newer with your patients, with your practice. It could just be like in your personal life. Like what's something new that you're like trying out to see if it helps you feel more human?
Okay, this is very random, but I'll go. I used to work in the operating room, like doing OR assisting. And I stopped doing that when I took my academic job. And anyway, I started doing my nails. But like, I do like little tiny, like can you see it? Little tiny flowers. Like, it's just like, I've always, since I was a kid, like I haven't done much painting in like years and years, but yeah, I always like doing little paintbrush, and I'm a real sucker for tiny art. So, I mean, I don't know if this will continue to be a thing. But yeah, it's just like a fun little craft. Like we love crafts. That's why one of our events will be a craft. So
Yes.
it's a nice little, sit down, listen to a podcast, like, do a very tiny, tiny little craft.
I love that. And those were really pretty. You were talented.
She's very talented. Very cool. So I was talking to Natasha about this actually last week, that I always enter the room when I have a patient and I say, how are you today? And I think that's like just a very natural thing to say. But I feel like I've said that now for 8 years, and I wanted to switch that up a little bit and see how it felt to say other things. So last week I entered the room and I tried to say, it's so nice to see you today, which is a subtle difference, right? But I actually found it kind of lovely because I think people weren't really expecting that. Some people would be like, oh, you know what? It's really nice to be here. Or like or I'm kind of struggling, but I am really happy to see you, right? And I just think it's kind of cool to switch up how you communicate with people to see how they react to that.
Oh my gosh. And that, like, both of those may seem small, but
very small.
To me, they do not seem small. Like, those are the little game changers. Like, those are the whole deal. Those really specific, like, everyone thinks there's going to be some big action plan that's going to fix all the whatevers, but I just don't. That's not my philosophy. It's not my life experience as a human on this planet. It's going to be these tiny little things. And it just subtly changes the whole butterfly effect. And I just love those. I love both of those.
Can I go again? Because Jaclyn's made me think of one more. Is that okay?
Yes, please. All of the examples.
This was the one that recently inspired we had a post on how do you set boundaries with patients? What's working well, what's not? I started saying, rather than saying I'm sorry, we can't cover any more today. When patients bring up one more thing, I actually will usually say I think this is a good amount of things to cover today. And I'll say we talked about your shoulder pain. We talked about, whatever else we talked about. I was like, I think this is a really good amount of things to cover. This is the plan I have for the things you brought up. And it just made me think. I was driving the car yesterday, just thinking it's interesting how our culture is more, more things covered, more patients, more exercise, more wellness, more of everything. So I think that's again just the idea of the joy in medicine. Also, it's just it doesn't always need to be more and more and more and more. Sometimes it's just right. This is just right for right now. So I find that that's such an uncommon type of communication, but I feel like it works well because I just say it with perfect confidence. This is a good amount of things. Patients are it is a good amount of things, and it's such a reasonable way to communicate. And I feel like maybe we need a bit more of that. I'm the right amount of busy. I got the right amount of a meals plan. It's not all of them. It's just the right amount for my family. The right amount of exercise. I don't need to do more. It's plenty. Just the right amount.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to look for opportunities to do that. I think I do say, I'm trying to think, do I say this? Sometimes I say wow, we've done some really good work here today. So it's less about an amount, but I'm look at the good work. Just again saying look at what we've done, and we're going to have to save that one for a similar. Oh, those were so yummy. I loved all of those so much. Thank you so much. All right. Well, the time flies as always with these. I could ask you 50 billion more questions, but I'm honoring everyone's time. So the last question I always like to ask is thinking of the people who are listening, who actually not even all of them work in healthcare. Apparently there's a bunch of teachers who listen to me. So that's fun. But people who are out there who are curious how to reconnect with their humanity, how to stay human. What is it that you want to say to them? We'll start with Jackie.
That's a very big question. Wow. I think that
you don't have to give them all the advice.
No, I won't give. I'll give one piece of advice, which is pretty basic advice, but I would say just be yourself, because that will never lead you wrong if you're just following your heart and following yourself and what your values are. Then most things turn out okay.
How about you, Natasha?
I think my suggestion would just be start small, because I think so many things are actually ruined by having like too big of a chunk of what you want to do. So, if you're having trouble wrapping up the visits, try one new phrase. If you're, having trouble with feeling negative about your day, like try the one thing you're grateful for when you get in the car to drive home. Or one thing before you go to bed. Like just try or listen to one podcast that might inspire you. Just do a small start and then ask yourself how that feels. Listen to how that feels. And then I think that's the most helpful thing to start to build your own momentum is just to start in a small way and pay attention to whether that's working for you.
That's beautiful advice from both of you. Be yourself and start small. That's it. I don't have any better advice than that. That's great advice. All right. Well, thank you so much. Keep me updated. I would love to know how this goes. I'm let's start to see, not you guys, but if anyone else listening wants to start up joy and medicine clubs in their backyard, I just think something like this would be really cool to see spreading in terms of the inspiration of it from even this podcast. Yeah. And then for everyone else who's listening, I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for having me.
I would love to take this work deeper with you. Visit joanchanmd.com today and discover my growing menu of options for restorative medical education to suit your learning needs. I offer one-on-one coaching, customized workshops, and self-study courses that allow you to connect not only with my work on a deeper level, but also with other healthcare humans just like you. So if you want to start humanizing your work in healthcare to a deeper level and do it in community with others, please visit joanchanmd.com and find those options and what fits you and your life today.